Okay for recording, like as usual. Sorry, Simone. Yeah.
No, that's perfect. No,
Yeah.
I'm just still on personal title, still a peace activist in the Netherlands, part amongst others of Rhythms of Resistance, which is supporting peace and other demonstrations. And in my daily life, I work for the local environmental authority.
And Simone is a column in the International Environmental and Human Social Rights World. So she was very modest about this. Okay, let's move on. Let me call Alberto. You said that you wanted to reintroduce yourself. Alberto, did I miss you?
Where is Alberto?
Sorry. I had the microphone off.
Yeah.
Very quickly, I've been an activist in nonviolent and anti-war movements since I was 16 in 1968. I'm an anthropologist. I have worked in Pakistan and Afghanistan in the Hindu Kush Mountains, and now I keep doing research in anthropology, and I'm active in Italian peace movements. I guess that's it. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And Alberto has already participated several times, but never with full speaking microphone functioning. Francesco, would you like to join us?
Yes. The first time I'm truly happy to be part of this association, and I accepted, grazie a Borrini-Feyerabend's invitation with a real pleasure. I honestly think the time is more than right for a personal and on commitment to peace. Today, no one really say they are not responsible for what is happening in the world. But before I begin this short self-introduction, let me apologize for my English. My pronunciation will probably hurt your ears, but unfortunately, I never been very good with language. Honestly, I'm a bit embarrassed to talk about myself, but I can say only that I am one of those classic academics who put down deep roots in one place and one university, the University of Catania, where I retired in November 2020. I had some international experience, especially in Poland, where I stayed for a long time, and I learned also the Polish. And so I learned the history of analytic philosophy in this country. Till I don't want to talk here about my research, my academic career, or my publication. I want only say that I come to a reading of pacifism that I call radical. Radical in the literal sense. It goes to the root, to the basic motivation underneath it. And that motivation is simple. No value, no ideal, no worldview, no ideology can ever be worth more than the lives of human beings, men, women, the elderly, and especially children. There is no justification, none of any kind, for the death of a child. For the moment a child smiles, goes out, no freedom or independence can be considered more important than the destruction, misery, and the suffering of an entire population. Because death offers no shelter, no remedy. A life that is broken forever. Whereas any other value or principle is, if it's lost, can at least in principle be regained, rebuilt, recovered. History is never forever. Political, social, and economic conditions can change with time and with human perseverance, but life is given only once, and death is irreversible. Well, so in the simplest terms, these are the reasons why I defend radical pacifism. A pacifism that accepts no justification for violence and war, except when there is a defense where the costs are less than a absence of defense. Well, I think that this is sufficient for my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesco. Francesco is a humanist in a few words and a professor of philosophy, and we love him to be with us. Dario, would you like to join us for just 1 minute presentation, please?
Thank you, Grazia, and good evening to everyone. My name is Dario Novellino. I am an environmental human rights defender since about 35 years. I mainly support indigenous communities against mining and for territorial rights in Palawan, Philippines, and other places in Southeast Asia. And I'm also supporting pastoralist communities in Italy for their civic rights. And I'm directing a small organization of indigenous people in the Philippines that is called Coalition Against Land Grabbing. I'm also an anthropologist associated with UCL in England, but I mainly use anthropology as a tool for advocacy. So I think that's enough.
Thanks so much, Dario. And I recognize that among the people who have never spoken to introduce themselves, there is Albert Chansul from Mexico, from Yucatan. I'm not sure that Albert wants to introduce himself because he reads what we are saying in a translation into Spanish, and I'm not sure he's ready to self-introduce or put on the camera. Albert, oh yes, you are. Albert querido, ¿quieres decir 2 palabras, por favor?
Muchas
Y si
gracias,
quieres
Gracia.
lo voy a traducir o si no, tú traduces tú mismo.
No, ya me había presentado.
Ah, qué bien.
Sí.
Estamos, ¿eh? Estamos
Va.
bien. Muy excelente. Gracias. Well, with this, we go back to English and we go back to Kati. A brief introduction that I feel quite embarrassing giving because I do admire tremendously people who manage to put their lives fully in line with their convictions and their hearts and their minds. And I think Kati is one such person with tremendous consistency and coherence for such a long time. She has been an activist for peace for how many decades, Karti? It's about 40 years and more, right? Yes. And she has been all over the world, and but especially in West Asia, Lebanon, Iraq, Afghanistan, all places where we have managed to, like Palestine, of course, bring war to people who were wanting much peace and normal life like everybody else. And Kati has gone there many times, bringing apologies, bringing food, medicines, warm clothes, everything that has to do with humanity, what Francesco was reminding us a moment ago. She has not done only that, she has done a tremendous amount of creative civil disobedience, especially in her native USA, from just opposing missile sites by doing something as simple as planting corn on top of them, to things that all of us could do, like simple disobedience, like not paying taxes. Of course, that implies that you can live a life of poverty, not caring much about getting money because the states could grab the money from you. But Kathy has managed to live in relative poverty in communities for such a long time. So many of us are looking up to you, Kathy, because we believe that, I believe that coherence is a tremendous asset that we all should cultivate a bit more. So let me check if, yes, I have to allow in a few more people. And so what can I say? Let's go. All of us can go and check Kathy's bio on Wikipedia. And most of all, we can hear from her about what she has learned in her lifetime as a peace activist that we could all sort of share and build up upon for our own work. Because frankly, many of us, and we are having a number of separate conversations in this larger group of the elders, are reaching the point of saying, what can we do together? What is the most important thing we can do together? It's great to be sharing ideas, but we want to be able to do more, to become more active. So, Kathy, the word is to you. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Grazia, and thank you everyone who has joined this call. Francesco, your self-introduction kind of introduced my talk, so thank you. I am desirous of adhering to radical pacifism. How can we learn to live together without killing one another? And as Grazia said, thank you so much, Grazia, for that introduction. I'm part of a group called World Beyond War that wants to abolish all wars, no cherry picking. And so later on, I'd like to just visit the website for World Beyond War. But I hope you will accept that I've found appealing to works of great art over history has been a good way for me to be orientated in these extremely dark times. So I'd like to share screen and start with a PowerPoint image which might be familiar to you. When I was in high school, quite young, one of our teachers showed us the film Night and Fog. And that film had a remarkable impact on me. I'm imagining you're familiar with Alain René's film about the concentration camps, filmed by French artist historians after the camps were liberated. And I thought to myself, I will never stand on the sidelines in the face of an unspeakable evil. But my friends, I went through the Vietnam War and I never picked up the phone to make a phone call. I never passed out a leaflet. I wrote my papers about the Vietnam War, not an activist. But that emotional group from watching that film did remain with me. And when I finally, I think I was 28 years old, kind of landed in a neighborhood that had a soup kitchen and a shelter and activists firmly committed to resisting wars, I felt such a sense of relief. And that has been abiding throughout my life. I felt very, very fortunate. But in more recent years, I learned about Hans and Sophie Scholl, who had helped create the White Rose Collective. And their bravery, distributing all throughout the university system in Germany pamphlets decrying Nazism, denouncing it. And then everyone was marked with the kind of headline, "We will not be silent." And a custodian saw them. They were picked up by the Gestapo. They were tried for 3 days and then executed by guillotine. And their names are known to this day. So, my friends, I then have to ask myself, what of the people in Palestine, the 260 young journalists in Palestine, in Gaza, who said,
Thank you for calling American Airlines. For English, press 2.
David, I think if you muted yourself, that would be great. Thank you.
To make a new flight reservation.
David, can you there? Okay, thank you.
I
So
think they did it.
it's fine, Grazia.
Grazia, I'm just gonna, you can actually mute people since you're the
Yeah,
host.
No,
I'm
then she'll
trying.
mute me.
Yeah, don't just mute you can go to their window and mute
Yes,
them.
I
Okay.
am trying my best.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Grazia.
Yeah.
So I think about these young people, they wanted to say, we will not be silent. And they were hunted down as prey. They were hunted down by snipers. Their press tents were bombed. In some cases, their entire families were erased. And so how shall we now, in this particular genocide in our time, respond as it sort of slides off of public awareness? The other group, which has been persecuted horrendously because they gave witness to atrocities they've seen, are the healthcare workers. And this is that iconic photo of Dr. Hossam Abu Safia walking toward two tanks. He had to turn himself into those tanks because he would not shut down the only hospital functioning in northern Gaza, the Kamal Adwan Hospital. And he is now going into his 14th month in prison. He's been tortured, beaten, starved. And so Doctors Against Genocide campaigned for him. And the Healthcare Workers for Palestine. You see this young woman with the badge, and she's holding up artwork that David Solnit created, showing Dr. Abu Safia walking toward the tanks and saying, "Free Dr. Abu Safia." And so it's encouraging to know that all around the world, people have not forgotten him, but there are 80 Gazan doctors still in prison. And it's a very brave thing for anyone to earn a medical degree in Palestine and Gaza today. So I think it's an important time to squarely look at the works of mercy as opposed to the works of war. When I was a Catholic child in catechism, we were called upon by the nuns to stand up and answer the question, what are the works of mercy? Yes, sister, the works of mercy are feed the hungry, clothe the naked, give drink to the thirsty, visit the imprisoned, care for the sick, bury the dead. And what are the works of war? In the United States, we are guilty as can be. Destroy crops and land, seize food supplies, destroy homes, scatter families, contaminate water, imprison dissenters, inflict wounds and burns, and kill the living. So I want to go back a few centuries. This is a painting that Peter Bruegel the Elder did in the 16th century from 1565. And it was a very brave painting. He called it the Massacre of the Innocents. And you see all of those soldiers on horseback, and that would have been like having an F-35 back in those days. Who could outpace those frightening soldiers? And they are doing a massacre, a pogrom and a massacre in a Flemish village, and taking people's babies and beheading them, lances into the bodies, the corpses then of little babies. Well, it turned out he was trying to recreate the biblical story of King Herod killing the innocents because he didn't want Jesus to come into the history. So the emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II, wanted to acquire a painting done by Bruegel because he was famous, and he took this one and he wanted to put it up in his castle or wherever, but he was afraid his own military would say, hey, wait a minute, that makes us look pretty bad. And so he told his court painters to paint over the images of babies and put a turkey or a fowl, make it look like it was maybe some thieving, but not outright massacre. And so they doctored up the entire painting to sort of put a veneer of decency, justification for war. Remember what Francisco said to us. Francisco, excuse me. And Peter Bruegel's son, not the elder, but the younger, had the father's original, and he restored it to what it originally was. So nice try, Emperor Rudolph, but we now have the original. And this is a painting that comes from 1808, Francisco Goya's painting. Still in that time, the Napoleonic era, soldiers were depicted as noble figures. But in 1808, on the 2nd of May, Spanish loyalists had rebelled against an invasion, and they were defeated. And so on the 3rd of May, the rebels and some who weren't rebels were rounded up and executed. So Goya creates this painting, and you'll notice that the soldiers with their guns aimed, they almost look like a big arachnid, a big spider. And the light draws us to the figure with outstretched arms, and our sympathies go with that figure. And then we see the remorse and the fear and the bloody carnage that's already been inflicted. So I think to be able to honestly tell what militarism feeds on. And this is a cartoon that I would have sworn it was from the US, but it actually comes from Russia, from the Soviet Union. It was created by Yuli Granv, and it was posted in a Soviet cartoon magazine called Crocodile. And in 1953, Yuli Granv entitled this cartoon, at this restaurant, only one person is served. And he was depicting that one being served as this hulking, almost inhuman looking figure of war. And then, according to commentaries, I've read that the character that's kind of cutting through the dollars is Harry Truman, and the kind of corpulent character with the monocle carrying the British pounds is Winston Churchill. And then you see the French francs, kind of smelly cheese, being carried by Antoine Bonnet. And then in the very back, Konrad Adenauer comes in with the German marks. And at the tables in the background, notice the little guy back at the education table. The globe is covered with cobwebs. And the woman at the arts table is sitting in front of a broken cello. And the healthcare table is empty, and the tablecloths are all patched. The sciences table is hobbled with a book underneath the leg. What if all of those isolated figures got together and did the proverbial turning the tables? But year in, year out, these merchants of death are like a vacuum. And that's how the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King portrayed it. They suck up the resources, the energies, the potential at a time when what we most need is collaboration between countries, including those which the United States has particularly demonized. And the French cartoon depicted here shows the same thing, with the different layers underneath capitalism upheld by government, education, preachers, military, the bourgeois. But then at the very bottom, the people whose lives are bent and broken by this system. And what if they were all to stand up? We are many, they are few. So I had an unusual exposure to little children standing up. And for those of you who've had familiarity with Afghanistan, Francisco, who was in the Hindu Kush, child labor has not been by any means eliminated in Afghanistan. And these are little child laborers. The youngster on the far left, Ali, was a young adult, and they had organized themselves, the Afghan peace volunteers, to give at least the rudiments of their language and how to do basic math problems and nonviolence classes to the local child laborers. And these little kids took it upon themselves to collect every toy gun they could put their hands on. They gathered them together, and you see little Sakina with her yellow-handled hammer pounding those plastic guns to smithereens. They buried the guns and then planted a tree on top of their grave of guns. And when the Taliban came, of course, all of these youngsters were at great risk. We've been able to help now over 100 get to safer havens, including Brazil, coming up, we hope. But the reality is that under the ground in Afghanistan, or just on the surface, as Paul Seaworthy's photograph shows, it's just a huge number of unexploded ordnances, including cluster bombs. And the United States just decided to purchase from Israel 213 million of these banned weapons that are so wicked. It's the weapon that keeps on killing because, long after a war might end, these things keep exploding. So I want to show you this as an example of artists in resistance to war. This little girl was an Afghan, or is an Afghan girl. She was orphaned in the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan when a United States drone, this was early in the U.S. drone warfare, bombed the refugee compound in Pakistan, killing her parents. And the drone operators in the United States in military parlance refer to the victims as bug splat because the pool of blood after someone is killed radiates heat, and on the screen of a drone operator, it looks like an amoeba, or they say bug splat. So these artists made a huge enlarged depiction of this little girl, the Afghan orphan who survived, and they entitled it Not a Bug Splat. And they installed it in a field next to her compound where she had lived. And it's there to this day, so that any aerial vehicle, drone or otherwise, flying over will see the face of this little girl. And here she is depicted with two of her siblings, and they're collecting the shrapnel of the bomb that killed their parents. Well, it's not just in faraway and immiserated places where these bombs are going into societies and wreaking havoc. And so this is a Dalkarlia, the traditional Swedish painted toy horse, being depicted as a Trojan horse because the nuclear weapons are going into the bases across Sweden, across Europe. And so Inga Palmer created this replica of her painting in a 3D fashion, and she stood outside of the Swedish Parliament in 2024 protesting this hideous proliferation of nuclear weapons in Europe. And now we find that so many countries are saying, well, we want more weapons, we want defense, but our security doesn't lie in being able to kill and destroy. And that's why this group is so important. You assert it and you see the interlocking visions. And I think another voice coming from a child that must be heard is that of Hind Rajab, the little girl who wanted to be a princess when she grew up. And she and her family members were in a car trying to escape because the Israeli military had said their village would be bombed. And so the escape didn't work out. The Israeli military fired on the car, killing her uncle and her auntie and three of her cousins. One surviving cousin was in touch with the Red Cross operators. They said to the little girls, be brave, be strong, say your prayers. Then a tank-fired missile killed the cousin, Layan, and little Hind was alone on the phone with the operators for hours while they tried to arrange to get an ambulance to safely reach the car. And then when the ambulance drivers were within vision of little Hind and she was saying, I'm so scared, please come, please help me, they fired on the ambulance workers and then killed Hind. But her voice will be heard because 3 films have been made, including one that is up for an Oscar award. And I was also very impressed by the artistry of Columbia University students who took over Hamilton Hall, threw love out the window. They threw that sheet out the window, renamed the hall Hind's Hall. And when you do a really well-formed action, it is a work of art. They've been persecuted, the movements have been squelched, but I think that we can still continue to uphold what Francisco said in the beginning: every child's life must be preserved. You cannot restore life to a child who's been killed, and those who've been maimed and broken and traumatized and orphaned are not criminals by any means. So when we were in Iraq anticipating the 2003 shock and awe bombing, we enlarged the photos of some of the most beautiful children you could ever meet. And we held those up at the border between Iraq and Kuwait. And we literally were shouting. I mean, the soldiers could hear us. Please don't do this. Follow your conscience. Well, the shock and awe bombing went on, and we were in a small family-owned hotel throughout that bombing. It was shocking and it was awful. But we hung the pictures over the second floor balcony of our hotel. And so when the Marines arrived, they set up their first checkpoint right outside this small family-owned hotel. And I think they must have wondered, where's their spaceship? Who are these people? But we called down to them, and they asked us who we were, and then one of my friends said, "They look awfully thirsty, don't they?" And so we went down. We had water, and we went down and offered them water and talked with. There were many, many conversations with those Marines, and some of them were devastated by what they had done, by what they had seen and heard. Not all, but some. So I want to think with you as I come to a close about the ways in which the world is now being geared up for war after war in the permanent warfare state that is the United States. It could be we'll be attacking Iran any day. And I think the major buildup is with China. And it isn't to say that China is totally innocent. The Chinese are developing robots that can carry horrific weapons, including thermobaric weapons. But when you look at the proportionate picture, China, in terms of military bases, has one base right at the tip of the Horn of Africa. You can see that Chinese flag. It's surrounded by the nuclear weapons of Russia, Europe, India, Pakistan, the United States. And the United States has, easily over 700 bases. There are 800 military bases in the world today. And, part of the work of World Beyond War involves trying to close all of these bases. And so, I think about the beautiful architecture of Yemen, and people think, oh, these Yemenis, these Houthis, they're crazy, more bombs, more bombs. And what are we destroying? What are we losing? What could happen if there were collaboration and a willingness to say, we've been wrong? So, my friends, I ask us not to give up on the United Nations. They have been weak. The Security Council has dominated, but let's remember the words from the book of Isaiah etched into the Isaiah wall across from the UN. When shall come the day when they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks? Nation shall not lift the sword against nation, neither shall they continue the ways of war any longer. So that concludes my slides, and I might try, if it's okay, one more item.
In Sarajevo, I can hear my heart pounding like a clock, hiding from the planes and from the bombing. Fire from the sky burning down my life. There is no more love and no more longing. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of king falling from the sky. There was no one left who can protect me. War's a wicked bird that never comes to rest, feeding on the dreams of all the children. Was an evil bird flying in the dark. Every holy promise has been broken. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of
Oh, I need to turn off the sound. Sorry.
Maybe, Kathy, you can tell us a few of the words of the song because it was
I'm
not
sorry.
very.
I'm trying to turn off the sound.
Kathy?
Yeah,
Yeah,
there.
perhaps you can give us. It was turned off, so thank you so much for the song. But maybe you can give us a few words of the lyrics of the song because it was not very easy through the internet to hear the lyrics. So maybe you are familiar with those.
Yeah, War's a Wicked Bird is the line that I most wanted to emphasize. The child says, "Once I had a home, once I had a life," and it's called "Song of Sarajevo." Judy Collins wrote the song, and I it's I think really Francesco communicated this to us in his self-introduction that every child has a right. So thank you. I'm sorry I took up time with something that you couldn't hear, but if you just Google the Wilson Chorale Song of Sarajevo, you can listen to it.
Thank you so much. You are not only courageous as an activist, you were also, for the first of our presenters, courageous enough to show us and to make us hear a song and to show us many beautiful work of art that reminded us what we are here about. So now, as usual, let me open up the conversation among us all with questions, comments, reactions, anything you would like to share with everybody else, and especially with Kathy, besides our gratefulness for her presentation and her life in general. I'm not sure I can see all the hands because please bear with me because Michelle was not able to join us today. So I'm trying to do a bit too many things at once. But please jump in if you feel like starting. Karima, thank you.
Thank you, Gracia. Kathy. I cannot thank you enough for what you shared. And it's every word you said comes from a deep experience, but from also a universal love that you really, really incarnate. So I was very, very moved. And at the same time, you come with joy. There is something in you that also the possibility of the world that you are talking about beyond war is already here with all these actions So my first resonance is to thank you for who you are and what you shine. And so I'm here in Morocco, and I'm feeling that shine, and it's really warming my heart. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Karima. You know, it's remarkable how children in war zones can show such incredible resilience. I had just watched a video of children dancing in between the tents in Gaza, but I remember being in Gaza in 2009, and after a ceasefire was finally declared, and the children, they like grabbed my hands and pulled me outside the house. And the first thing they did was find a tarp, a big tarp, and they started picking up firewood, you know, twigs and scrub brush, and they were gleaming because they knew they could bring it back to their mother and help her to cook. And I've seen that again and again, but you know, one of those children was one of the first to be killed after October 7th. He was all grown up and had two children of his own, and he was lying in his bed and a building collapsed on him. So, you know, I I think if we listen to the earth and listen to the children, that's actually, even though it may sound kind of crazy, that's a way forward.
It certainly is, but you also mentioned something, Kathy, that really resonated with my own fears, which is thermobaric weapons. And I've just heard that about 3,000 people in Gaza most likely have been victims of thermobaric weapons. I don't know if you all know what it is all about, but okay, thermobaric weapons are so destructive that they just simply vaporize people. And so nothing is left, no bones, no DNA, no nothing. And this is the fate that most likely has happened to 3,000 people. And how do we know that? It's because they were known to be in some places, and other people were killed in the same places, but these people have disappeared. So there is no way that we even can imagine to bury them. So facing the marvelous innocence and wonder and fullness of life of children with thermobaric weapons and many others, technology of destruction that we are having today is what we are about. We are about facing this and doing something about it, but we need to know together what are we going to do, what strategic approach are we going to take. And now I see Paul has raised his hand and maybe he has an answer. Paul, would you like to join us?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm moving around, so I might not be able to catch it. But I did want to thank Kathy for being here and for sharing her deep experiences in peace building and peacemaking. And I think we don't dwell on this too much, but the real culprit in the current advance towards a war economy and in a war-filled world is really the United States, and particularly the Trump administration. So I could elaborate on many of the points Kathy was making around how much money is going into the war economy now. The US alone is going to put in $1 trillion, and the rest of the world is going to double its defense and war expenditure by 2030. So what is the role of peace activism in writing what's going on in the United States? Because if we don't correct that, I think the rest of the world is going to be pulled in by the inertia of this big ship that United States constitutes. And I'm particularly interested in Kathy's views about how the peace movement might manifest its ideas in the 2026 midterm elections and the 2028 presidential elections, because I feel that not all of us are cut out to go on the front lines and do the picketing and all the other brave things that Kathy is doing. But in our day-to-day lives, there are so many things that have to be done in our own neighborhoods, in our own communities. And I'm wondering what people with a peace mindset might be able to contribute to overturn what's going on in the US now. Thank you, Kathy, for being with us.
Thank you, Paul.
Thanks so much, Kathy. I'm sorry to cut you off, but may I ask Chuck and Jeff to offer their thoughts, and then we'll come back to you, so we'll have a broader conversation. Yes, you agree? Okay, thanks. Chuck,
Okay.
please.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for sharing everything that you shared and reminding me of some of the things, the images that really affected me when I was younger too, the films of the survivors of the concentration camps. And I remember seeing that very Goya painting in Madrid as a young man, and just being totally blown away by it and by all of his very realistic depiction of war. So anyway, thank you for that, and then for everything else that you presented. Um, Particularly, I'm moved by I feel like there's an opportunity maybe in the area of the doctors who are being held and the other prisoners that are being held, of publicizing that, and if and perhaps pushing for a Nobel Peace Prize for Dr. Abu Safia would be, I think, a really worthy way for the Nobel Committee to kind of redeem itself a little bit, I think, from what's been going on with their Nobel choices recently, and or their last choice, I should say, perhaps. Um, but anyway, I'm interested also in whatever tangible actions you might suggest for us to take. Thank you.
Yeah. And Jeff, please.
Hi, everyone. I want to share a little of my experience and current thinking as a Quaker, as someone who grew up in a strong peace tradition, and the peace testimony of Quakers was, I think, their first testimony, the first issue on which they came together in unity to say we have to stand against war firmly. My father spent a year in jail for refusing to register for the draft or accept conscientious objection status because he saw that as too tied to the military enterprise. My mother I was born in 1922 in Potsdam and grew up in World War II and lived through the horrors of war. It's kind of what brought them together. And now I'm their progeny. I think a lot about how I can find the courage to bear witness to peace. A couple of things I'm doing, and I'm mentioning these because I would welcome any ideas and help any of you might have. I'm giving a 3-day Quaker study session at the Canadian Yearly Meeting in session this summer, and I've decided to call it Peace on Earth, Peace with Earth. And part of that is I think I want to talk about how the peace testimony emerged among Quakers, but then look at whenever the horror in Gaza, the genocide, the cruelty, it, I think back to Yitzhak Rabin, who was a military guy, but his speech, his "No More Blood and Tears" speech, and I consider to be the last. Really, when he died, I saw hope died in a way that's just, and now look what's unfolded 30 years later. I want to, in terms of the heart of this, United States is symbolically uh, a very problematic actor on the world stage right now, but it's the culture of othering of dividing, of promoting hate instead of love, and division instead of understanding. So when I think of Yitzhak Rabin's speech, I also have been learning about the great law of peace, the Guy Gaw of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and one of their main ceremonies, which is still very important in my understanding, is the ceremony of condolence. And this was the extremely wise recognition within the nations of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy that in order to promote peace, they had to come together and give condolence to each other, to sit with the grief and the pain that they caused each other, and to see that that was not something to continue. So I guess I'm drawing inspiration, seeking courage like the rest of you to do what we can in really, really troubling times on the question of peace.
Thanks, Jeff. Kathy, do you feel like getting back now, or do you want more people to offer thoughts?
Well, thank you. I anticipated that there would be a diversity of challenging and important thoughts. I do want to mention that thermobaric weapon has been improved upon by the Chinese, and they've got a possibility to deliver it robotically. So the United States military is now kind of swerving away from Europe and saying, oh, we're focused on China. But, is there a possibility to emphasize potential for collaboration to solve the greatest problems we face: nuclear annihilation, climate collapse, and new pandemics, plus the toleration now for genocide? And I think that we need education, education, education. We need to keep on reaching out to our communities and try to both veer away from state-centric ways of seeing things. On the continent of Africa now, Pan-Africanism is resurgent. And why should people in Africa accept borders that were imposed by colonialists who extracted their resources, enslaved them, destroyed their societies? So I think we need to work within our communities, grassroots, reaching out, supporting these very fine initiatives that are already there.
No fares and flight information are also available on our website.
We should mute David. There we go. But as we are trying to come up with new initiatives, I just want to especially emphasize that in Europe, the International Peace Bureau has a very sturdy plan that they've enacted before, which is called GDAM, Global Demonstrations Against Militarism. So please be in touch with those plans for this spring. I think it's in April and May. And then World Beyond War also has a phenomenal mapping of all of the different distributions of weapons and who has refused to sign which pact. And so I think we can inform ourselves, but constantly reach out to our relatives, our friends, former co-workers, elected officials, write those letters to the editor. And okay, so if this meeting had happened 40 years ago, I'm willing to bet that every fifth one of us would be on our fifth cigarette. Am I right? We wouldn't dare do that now in public. And so it isn't as though the people with the medical groupings thought, oh, we're getting there, we're so close. I think they were thinking, are we ever going to succeed? And then it finally took. Now, I know the United States is dumping its cigarettes on other poorer countries, and I'm sorry to see that. But think about that revolution. Think about the fact that no longer is, slavery practiced in the way that it was when the slavers were going through Africa and bringing people to other countries. The U.S. prison system is a reenactment of slavery. I've spent 18 months in U.S. prisons, and I can testify to that. And the other thing is courage is the ability to control our fears. Everybody feels fear. Everybody does. But sometimes we get practice controlling our fears, and that's something to be grateful for. So I've talked at length. Thank you. Oh, just to say, Jeff, thank you for drawing attention to This Is My Song or Finlandia. And I want you to know that we taught that song to kids in Baghdad, and within 2 days, they sang it back to us with flute and violin accompaniment in Arabic and in English. It's a beautiful song.
Thanks so much, Kathy. Now, before I give the word to Francesco and Karima, who have raised their hands, I'd like to go back a moment to why we are here and why we are discussing all this, because it is beautiful to have our own spaces of peace and creating peace in our own neighbors and so on. But we also are a group. And as a group, and we are a group of people of quite some experience, quite some privilege, because we have had the chance of being educated, of being having positions of relative influence in the world, and we still have for many in the group itself. We have a responsibility. We have a heightened responsibility as individuals and as a group. And as part of that responsibility, it's a good idea to figure out, can we do something as a group? And this has been a question that has become more and more acute and relevant in the last few months, because we first dedicated ourselves to clarifying issues. And many of the things that we also touched upon today were touched upon even in some depth in the past. But beyond clarifying and analyzing issues, is there anything we can do together? So that's our I hope you allow me to remind everybody that this should be somehow a question for all of us. And now to Francesco, who has no responsibility for our relative lack of action, because we have already taken a few initiatives, because he's coming for the first time. But Francesco, please say what you need to say, and then Karima.
Yes, I support with all heart Kathy's speech, but I'd like to say a few things about the slogan "Just Peace," which keeps getting waved around, especially in the debates I'm familiar with here in Italy. The line usually goes like this: there can be no peace without justice, and therefore, so the argument continues, you can build anything good or even talk about peace until you have first eliminated the evil. People repeat it about the war in Ukraine, about what is happening in Gaza, and about other conflicts around the world. But the moment you say just peace, a couple of questions pop up immediately. Just for whom? And good according to what standards? Based on which values? Because, in my view, the just and the good are a slippery ground to build peace on. And just justice is a tricky word anyway, because every war looks just to the people fighting it, and it looks even more just if they win. No side in a conflict is willing to say, yes, we are in the wrong, and nobody will ever agree to be labeled the only one responsible of the destruction and the deaths. So when you demand justice and goodness as a precondition for peace, you are basically putting the cart before the horse. Why? Because the only way you get a clear, just, or good in wartime is through the total defeat of one side. And then, of course, the justice you get is the justice of the winner and the winner's court. On the top of that, the idea that you can determine absolutely whether a war is just or unjust is another example of a certain kind of hubris, the kind of you find in cultures so dazzled by their supposed superiority that they start believing that they have the eye of God, or the all-seeing gaze of Plato's philosopher, able to sort good from evil with perfect certainty. I think we need to flip the whole thing around. There is no justice without peace. When a conflict breaks out, a reasonable kind of pacifism does everything it can to reach a ceasefire, not by settling who is right and who is wrong first, but simply to create the condition where peace talks can even begin. So peace is the precondition for resolving things in a way that is actually just, because justice in real life is almost always the result of a compromise, a shared discussion, an honest effort to understand the other side's reasons, and agreement backed by the wider community of states. But all of that only becomes possible when people have cooled down, when the image starts getting repaired, when lives return to something resembling normality, and when mutual hatred has had time to settle. You need patience, you need time to treat the wounds first. And the goal is not some grand triumphant victory of justice and good with capital letters. It is a workable compromise, a shared sense of what counts as fair and acceptable, enough to let people live together without needing violence. Think the other way around, no peace without justice, usually ends up meaning my version of justice, my version of the good. And that very often slides into something else, the arrogant claim that one civilization, one set of values gets to present itself as its universal standard for everyone else. Excuse me for the long speech.
Thank you so much, Francesco. And let me just remind that in the first year of our gatherings, we sort of focused not so much on peace or war, but on the causes of the problem that we identified with militarism. And militarism is the glorification, is the expansion with no limits, and the aggressive use of military violence and in general really the use of weapons. So in a way, let me call back the meaning of our group, which is a group of elders, privileged people who want to do something against militarism and for disarmament and the cultures of peace. So all you just said is great, and it is the ground on which we need to build on something positive and active. Karima.
Thank you, Gracia. I want to be actually in a bit of resonance to what Francisco was saying, and at the same time, at one point, Kathy, you were talking about disarmament, but you also mentioned toleration to genocide as one of the factors, one of the manifestations of what is unfolding right now. The normalization, the toleration. We are forced, and it's an extreme violence, to witness genocide, the massacre of children on a daily basis. And and we are forced to be witness, and basically we can turn our faces away, but then is self-violence, because we are accepting to normalize something that is deeply self-dehumanizing, or we are honoring, that our responsibility as witness, and to stay there with the pain, but also not to remain passive. My question to you, Kathy, is what would you say after all these years of witnessing probably the most extraordinary expressions of humanity, and also the most terrible expressions of dehumanization and violence? What do you say today that you can say maybe we are getting to a threshold or not, in terms of our ability to go to the extent of normalizing genocide, and in a systemic way? And in resonance to what you said, Francisco, and I thank you so much for everything that you're bringing today. I want to read, and I'm sure you know this, most of you, but this quote has helped me a lot, because as you were saying, Francisco, you were talking about peace and justice. There's no justice without peace, and there's no peace without justice. I think but here there's something else that I feel that Kathy embodies so much, that is compassion. In order for this, the compassion, the peace, and the justice, to allow us not to flip on the other side, not to reproduce what we are rejecting and what we are refusing. And I might read to you, peacemaking doesn't mean passivity. It is the act of interrupting injustice without mirroring injustice, the act of disarming evil without destroying the evildoer, the act of finding a third way that is neither fight nor flight, but the careful, arduous pursuit of reconciliation and justice. It is a revolution of love that is big enough to set both the oppressed and the oppressors free. This is Shane Claiborne, The Common Prayer, a liturgy for ordinary radicals. I'm sure that you know him. And I just wanted to hear what you have to say about this.
Well, Karima, thank you very much. If I could just say quickly, when Shane first came to Iraq, we were doing a walk across the country, and his young friends had a song thinking about Christian revolution, and they were singing it, Revolution. And I said, we're in a dictatorship. You've got to stop singing that song. But Shane then came during the shock and awe bombing, and I'll never forget him playing Duck, Duck, Goose with the children. He's also a clown. And, they just had a chance to run and play. I like to sort of blend Shane's very, very heartfelt belief that we shouldn't mirror the injustice that we want to overcome with the words of Albert Camus from Neither Victims Nor Executioners. He said, we're in history up to our necks. And he said, I, for my part, make the formidable gamble that words are stronger than munitions. And that, there are so many billionaires now that want to say, my pockets are going to be even heavier with what I've thieved and extracted from people if we make munitions stronger than words. So it is a gamble. But I think the stakes are so very, very high. And your group, I believe, has a chance to move into that vacuum created by the Security Council's abandonment of its responsibilities. And so my hope is that everyone in this group will urge their own country to return to the Security Council and the General Assembly with the demand of uniting for peace, that we cannot continue to accept the vetoes of the very country, the United States, provisioning the genocide in Gaza and now the West Bank as well. So please don't give up on the United Nations, and please think of being part of these global days to close military bases, global days against militarism. Thank you.
Thanks, Karima and Kati. And the next person to speak is Chris, who is keen to reform the UN and keep it alive. But Chris, up to you.
First of all, Kathy, thank you very much. I have to apologize for being extremely late, so I just caught the tail end of your eloquent presentation. So thank you very much for that. I have a question more than anything else right now, which is, and it's not just to you, but to all of us. How did you feel? How did you react listening to the speech of Marco Rubio at the Munich Security Conference? In a nutshell, I felt thrown back 500 years, being a fly on the wall in certain palaces, thrown back as a fly on the wall to the Berlin Conference of 1884, with the same, witnessing a very similar attitude. And I was asking myself, we've come so far to basically be back at the beginning. I just wanted to know what you felt. I think I have given an indication of my feelings, so to speak. I won't elaborate, because I may very quickly go down this slippery road of being politically very, very incorrect. So I'll leave it at that and hand over to you and anybody else who wants to say a comment.
Christopher, I remember being in a pediatric ward of a Baghdad hospital, and it was like a death row for infants. And a British journalist, Felicity Arbuthnot, turned to me and she asked me, Kathy, do you think it's possible to die of shame? And that's how I feel thinking about Marco Rubio. I mean, on the heels of J.D. Vance the previous year, turning the clocks back into this presumption that the manifest destiny imperialism is correct, and then trying to get Europe to say, oh, okay, I threw a bone to you. But I think part of the reality we're facing is that the United States military, which has enormous power in this country, is now saying we're going to get ready for war with China. We don't need Europe anymore. And that's a hideous attitude, and it's one which I think we can, all of us, come together to oppose, but to do it very vocally and very strongly. But I should let others respond. Thank you.
Just very quickly, but as much as we're pointing fingers at the U.S. Government, or maybe it has now become a regime, I don't know. I was particularly disappointed in the fact that he got a standing ovation by majority Europeans, right? So anytime, we have a saying, anytime you're pointing a finger at somebody, three of your fingers are pointing at you, right? So it's not just, it's a psychological, a pathological reality we are facing within what is known as the Western world. So I leave it up to the others to comment.
At the moment, I don't have any other hands up, so let me say that I guess I haven't heard or watched all the comments to that Munich conference, but I would say that the lack of negative reactions and the standing ovation are just indications of the abysmal insignificance of the European leaders at the moment, so-called leaders. I think that they are ashamed of themselves. They don't know what to do, and they go for war because it's the only thing they can go for. And we are back to the issue and problem we have identified of militarism, and militarism going to the depth of our economies, of our political systems that is fed by the corruption that comes through militarism, and by the media that is also very much captured, with the academia that is also very much captured. It's like a sick overall system. And what you saw in Munich is the reflection of that sickness, and the fact that the majority of people are kept totally brainwashed and unaware of what is going on is what we need together to try to resist. Because otherwise, we may have the best intentions. We may be the most peace-loving people in the world. We may know all the songs and all the poems, and at the same time, we are going to be one after the other, and our children, victims of this militaristic, ridiculous, frankly, ridiculous culture, so let me insist to the point of being absolutely obnoxious. What do we do as a group? Can anybody have an answer to this that we can move on? Trevor, thank you.
Grazia, I'm glad that you keep asking that question because it's really hard. It's really hard to answer.
Yeah.
And as you know, and we keep on sort of trying to put our finger on the points of leverage that we know about. And we've talked about the United Nations, and we talked about, political leadership in countries and so on. And possibly that is still a strategy, to be coherent and to keep raising the same issues in these forums. But the question is, does that work? Does it ever work? Has it ever worked? I was very impressed in an earlier call with the whole UN, the kind of rubric of the 1990s, before we even had internet, and we had, they're really good principles. We have all of that, but still we haven't made a difference to the fundamental thing that you're talking about. So so I kind of agree with you. The system is stacked against its own reform. So the opposite side, which we see people activating, and people say, well, it is the only thing that has ever worked, is mobilization of a lot of people, mobilization of people who will share the views. And maybe one of the things that we can do that is practical is put that in a form that is easily transmitted and communicated to millions of people. That it's not so much, it's not that monumental effort that you have to phone millions of people or write millions of letters as in the past. We can reach people through a number of means that were never accessible before. I do agree with you, though. I mean, the media giants also are controlling the social media space. So it has to be very careful not to get shut down. But even mass protests in the streets get shut down. People are being murdered in the streets for raising their voices. Even in the UK, peaceful protest is, getting people dragged into jail. So the system is stacked against protest completely. So somehow we have. I feel maybe it's the kit. You need the kit. Like maybe I've said this before, so I apologize. But when we were first talking about climate change it was almost an impossible thing to contemplate how any single person could do anything about climate change. And then it became, through the film that, the sort of inconvenient truth, it became possible to act unilaterally. You can switch the light off, you can change the way you drive, you can change the way you go shopping, you can make individual choices. If we give people the recipes, the right ones, that they can act on, you can motivate and mobilize. So I feel if we distilled some of our absolute gems of insight, I'm trying to hold on to this, that there are ways to influence millions of people against mass militarism, against, going along with this, the political leadership saying our only option is to double our arms spending. It's not the only option, but who's telling them that it's not the only option? So we need those messages distilled. These are the 10 best things you can do, or the 100 best things you can do, or 100 things that school children can do, or that, bus drivers. I'm just trying to think of the constituencies that might, become voices for the issue that you're talking about. So it's either political, political strategy, or it's mass mobilization. I'm not sure, and I'm losing faith in the idea that political strategy is of any use.
Thanks, Trevor. You reached a point that some of us in a separate conversation also reached a few days ago. I'm not sure, Kathy, do you need to speak now, or can we give the word to Jeff?
If I could just quickly say that we ought to keep in mind that the Palestine Action community in the UK has been acquitted of accusations of crime, and the just another batch of charges against them were thrown out of court. So that's very significant. And in Minneapolis, Minnesota, the people in their massive mobilization have managed to get ICE not entirely out of their communities, but they certainly prevailed, I think, over the lying that occurred after the horrific murders. So thank you. I'll shut up now.
Thanks so much. Yeah, indeed. And in Australia, there are huge protest demonstrations at the moment after the visit and so on. Jeff, please.
Yeah. So, Grazia, I want to just try to respond to what you said. We as a group here have some kind of an identity that may have some impact, and maybe how can we harness that? I wonder, if there could be, and this is, I think, building on what Trevor said, is if we can come together around a fairly short statement, and that then could be, the Guardian might publish something like that if we say who we are, and then that can be used in different ways. It can be converted into a petition, and that can have different outlets. It's not the only thing, but I'm just trying to think of what we together as a group can do to see, well, if we do have impact, we have it or we don't, depending, given where we're all coming from and what we look like when you take us together. And one way this distills down to me in fairly simple but hopefully powerful terms is this, the Trump administration, but this is echoed many other places in terms of either implicitly or explicitly. It's this notion of peace through strength, which to me is the peace that results when a bank robber tells people not to move, with the gun pointed on them. It's not peace. It's never a peace. So the correct formulation, the thing we should stand for is strength through peace. It's a different notion of peace, and it's a different notion of strength. And I think it also echoes this really rich conversation earlier about the role of justice. And I think if you go into specific situations rather than have sort of a macro narrative that should apply all over the place, it can be easier to come together around a group. And then people on their own, we're all doing things. As I explained some of the things I'm doing, I'm also working with a group called Veterans for Peace on a march they want to do from Montreal to the United Nations next fall. So, we can tailor something like that to particular situations where we're more closely close to and have more knowledge about. But that would be one thing that I think kind of harnesses perhaps what you're suggesting.
Yes, and yes, Dario, in just a second, but answering to Jeff, I would like to remind everybody that we have developed pretty early in the existence of this group a call to action that exists in 5 languages, and we have it up on our website. And if you would be so kind to go back to that call to action, and please send it to me, because otherwise the whole mailing group becomes too crowded and people turn off. But please send to me whatever is missing there, whatever you would like to add, and we'll try to make it as fit as it can be to your own perspective of things. But let me also ask you to share that call to action, for whatever imperfect it may be, to at least 5 people, and to encourage them to sign if they feel that they agree, and to share it with others, because it is important to pass on whatever we have understood, as you just said, Jeff. So let's make sure that we try to share our understanding with others. And so I will, with your permission, I will try to ask everybody in our mailing list to do the same, to share it, and to offer all the editorial comments and additions and subtractions that they would like to come up to. So we have something that we can build upon rather than starting from scratch. And I'm aware that it's 1938, so let's try to wrap it up in 5-10 minutes. And Dario, please join the conversation.
Okay, grazie. Thank you. Kathy, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And it has been wonderful also to hear your point of view. Now, my perception is that all that is happening in this moment in time, what we see around the world, is a clear sign that capitalism, imperialism, colonizations are actually collapsing. The most so-called democratic country around the world are collapsing. Now, before a system completely disintegrates, it is capable of inflicting incredible pain. All this show of strength, this capacity of generating horror, it's a sign of weakness. It's not a sign of strength. Israel, as a parliamentary democracy, as well the United States, for the same reasons, they have already been judged by history. They are dead countries. We should stop to consider these countries as some sort of living beings. They are just deteriorating. They are in a process of decomposition. They are disintegrating. But this disintegration is going to take a long time. It's not easy to wait and stand here for the collapsing of this system, but we can read the sign of history, and we can understand that these countries have failed their own ideology that was based on justice, democracy, equality for everyone. It's collapsing. So history has already judged them. And the people that we continue to claim they are dead because they are buried under rubble, they are the living beings. They are the people giving us strength and power to continue. So let's stop celebrating the militaristic power of this huge state. Yes, of course, they are powerful. But again, as I'm trying to say, that power, the way it is actually implemented at this moment in time, it's a sign of tremendous weakness. When this tremendous weakness takes place, when the country and the nations disintegrates, that means that the power is slowly moving into the hands of people. So this is a great moment of history because we are going to take that power, transform that power, and we are not going to allow for these monsters to regenerate after deterioration. But this is going to be a very long process, and maybe many of us who are fighting for these changes will not see the changes happening during our lifespan. But the seeds of these changes are really taking place. Now, one thing I would like to say when Grazia is asking, what should we do? Now, you have noticed that everybody, many organizations internationally, they are somehow trapped in their own agenda. So the environmentalists, ecologists would say, well, we are taking care of protecting the Amazon, or we are taking care of the orangutan in Borneo. Then a human rights organization will say, yes, we care for Palestine, but at this moment in time, we are working in Myanmar and we are working with indigenous people somewhere. So everybody has some precise target. And the problem that I see, that all these organizations do not have a clear idea of how their own independent struggle is connected to the struggle of so many other organizations and communities fighting in the world. And nobody is really willing to stand up. Imagine, I just give an example. Imagine if WWF would stand up and say, oh, we are fighting for Palestine. Of course, they should realize that, just give an example. If the forest is being destroyed in Southeast Asia, in other places, because also nickel is being extracted from this forest, and it is used for constructing military powerful equipment, or it is used in Europe for so-called ecological transition away from biofuel. So actually, the fights of the environmentalists is not separated at all from the fights we are actually trying to deal with in relation to Palestine, in relation to militarization and other problems in the world. But the reasons why these big organizations don't like to search for this connection, because it would put them into trouble. Because if WWF stand up and says, well, we are also for Palestine, maybe half of their funds would be cut. Okay, so this is also the reality. So why I'm saying this? What should we do? What should we do that every one of us has a special connection with an independent organization? Somebody as an anthropologist has connection with the university. Somebody as an environmentalist has connection with big environmental groups like Greenpeace, WWF, and others. Some others has connection with Amnesty International or other organizations. So everyone who has that connection, that knowledge of how these organizations independently work, should put their effort to create the connection, to approach them and say, look, we should all work together. Because if we really want to take the opportunity of changing the system, now that the system is collapsing, although it appears as very powerful indeed, the only chance is unity. And the only way of building this unity is to free ourselves from our own independent compartments. There is no academicians anymore. There is no environmentalists anymore. There is only group of people realizing this precious relationship between humans and their environment, between humans and natures, and understanding that what is happening in terms of militarization around the world is connected by only one single line touching everybody and every institution. So answering to your question, Grazia, the only things that I think can be done in this moment in time is bringing all these forces together. Now, all these organizations that do not feel like to join this struggle for anti-militarization, it means they are probably also on the wrong side of history. They don't want to take chances. They don't want to take risk. Okay, they are not with us. They will be away from us. And eventually, they can also become their enemies one day. But as much as we can, we have to construct and building in this kind of system where all these organizations start to work together. So the next time that I will go for a demonstration on Palestine, I will also bring my own poster about indigenous people in Palawan being the victim of a slow genocide that is taking their land away, converting their forest into open pit mining for nickel, the nickel that we use in our society for ecological transition. Because I will try to build that connection. So although indigenous people, the forest, the Amazon, it seems very far away at this moment in time from what is happening in Palestine. No, actually, everything is completely connected. So the work that I think the challenge ahead is for us to build this connection, convince other organizations that such connections are justified, do exist, and then build a roadmap for change. That's it.
Thank you so much, Dario. And I think we reach the time in which it is good to close our meeting with huge thanks to Kathy, who has, who is an example for all of us. Also in terms of the connections, I think she has been connecting with so many others through the world. And so thanks, huge thanks again to you, Kathy, and it has been inspiring hearing from you. Let me say again, suggest again that all of you go back to our call to action. Please read it in the language you prefer. Please sign it if you have not signed it and if you feel, of course, like signing it. But also, please ask yourself what you like to add to it, subtract to it, what twist you would like to give it. First thing. And second thing, please share it with at least 5 other people and ask them, do you see the connection that Dario was just saying right now to what you are doing? And if you do, please consider it in your own work and sign and then share it with others so that the way we can, we start spreading this awareness in the world. Because let's face it, there are not many people who are very aware of it. And we could go on and on describing to ourselves everything that is not sharing that awareness that is going on around us. Unless anybody, yes, Chris.
Just a quick question. Could you put the website in the chat? Some of us may not know the website.
Of course. Let me put it. I have not monitored the chat today because I was trying to monitor many other things. So, but in any case, let me give it to you. It's very simple. www.elders4, the digit 4, peace.org. And it's not just because we call ourselves Elders for Peace, but because Elders for Disarmament and the Cultures of Peace is a bit too long. So we shrunk it up, Elders for Peace, but we are not like apple pie. So we are a bit more complex than that. And welcome, Beverly, but we are about to close. So very sorry to see you so late. And but you can, like everybody else, everybody will be able to go to our website and find all the recordings of the past meetings, and just in a few days, the recording of this meeting as well. So any last word of wisdom? Otherwise, I will wish everybody good day, good evening, good dinner, good dreams.
You said it's Elders numeric 4
Yes,
peace.org.
.org. You find it?
I get a weird.
Did you put elders?
Yeah, with S.
Yes, 4peace.org.
This is what I get.
Okay, let me see.
If I just share my screen.
Yes,
Do you see that?
please. Because you are asking to use the domain. Did you put
No,
www?
okay, let me put www.
Yeah, dot. Okay. Yes,
Perfect. Okay,
here we
sorry,
are. Yeah, and
my
look at the
bad.
menu. The menu is very, very rich. Among the things we have already done, we have written open letters to the parliament members in Europe, to the Italian prime ministers. We have also done lots of small local things, gatherings and participation in various demonstrations. But we try now to be more focused on what we can do as a group, as an international group, as you can see, and we have people truly all over the world. And it is something that may characterize us, but not only us. Let me also give you another suggestion. Go to the resources in our website, and you will be amazed how many groups, marvelous, intelligent, really resourceful, original groups exist with similar, not exactly like us, but similar issues as a focus. And that is what Dario was talking about, not only in terms of environment, human rights, you name it, just in terms of disarmament and peace. A wonderful amount and variety of groups. The fact is, however, that we do not connect enough. And so this word connection is very important, and we may want to figure out how to do better. But please go to the website anyhow and send suggestion, okay? Thank you, my friends. It has been a very powerful meeting. Huge thanks again to Kati, and see you again next time. I think we are going to have another very, very powerful meeting, and this time quite focused on the UN and what the UN can change into. Thanks again, and have a good night.
And
Thank you.
Grazia, I'm
Yes.
not able to save the chat. Would you be able to save the chat
I
and share
will.
that?
I will. In fact, the chat is extremely rich today. I've seen coming up the comments, but I have not even been able to see it myself. So
Oh,
I
okay.
will get it recorded and I will pass it on to everybody.
All right. Thank you.
All the best. Thanks so much, and thanks for the
Bye,
newcomers.
everybody. Bye.
Ciao,
Bye-bye.
ciao.
Ciao.